Good morning. This is Kim De Silva from Language of Relationships, and welcome to Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 forward. Buenos dias. And this morning, I am really happy to have my friend Susy here to talk to us today. And please do excuse me if I end up coughing, having a coffee fit at any point in time. I seem to be coming down with something. But Susy is well, I'm going to ask her the questions, and she's going to tell you all about where she's from, where her husband is from, where they are now. But we're talking about cross-cultural relationships. And one of the reasons why I really like this topic, it's one of the reasons I got into this business to begin with. All right. I was teaching a lot of ladies Spanish, and one of the reasons why they were coming to learn the language was that they kept saying they have language barriers and cultural barriers with their partners who was from a Spanish speaking culture. But very often some of the things that they were talking about as language barriers and cultural barriers were more around just plain old relationship issues. That said, cultural barriers and language barriers are real. They do have an impact. And that's why I am really excited to have Susy here today to tell us a little bit about what it's like living in a very multicultural home. So,
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. I love the topic, and I'll be happy to just share my experience as a multicultural couple.
awesome. Thank you. All right, Susy, where are you from? Where is your husband from?
Okay, so I'm Mexican, and he's from Russia.
Yeah, you just had to go as different as possible.
I know, right? It's like very, very different. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but when he mentioned to his grandma that I was Mexican and that he potentially would have to move away from Russia, she was just like, "But she just looks like an Armenian. Why can't you get an Armenian? It's closer."
Like, she already looks like one. Can you have a type?
Yeah, okay. And it's closer, logistically it's easier.
Oh my goodness. All right. So you're from Mexico, he's from Russia. How did y'all even meet?
Well, I'm from Mexico, but I'm from Cancun, Mexico.
Ah,
So it's very multicultural, if you can call it that. Well, at least it's very touristic, right? So a lot of nations
yeah.
collide there. And so this was at a New Year's party, 2011, the New Year's Eve of 2011. And me and my friends last minute decided to buy these tickets to a fancy party in a club in the hotel zone where a lot of tourists are. Right? Like, this is not the downtown, this is like the hotel zone where the touristic areas are. And so we were like so excited going to celebrate. It's the first time I was spending the New Year's without family, just friends. And he happened to be in Cancun for holiday vacation too, for Christmas and New Year's with a friend. So we're at the club, and you start dancing, and you need to have a kiss at midnight. So we were dancing, and then we hit it off, and basically that's it. Then we went to, like, he begged me to go out from the club because you cannot talk there, right? Like, it's impossible to
No,
communicate.
especially with the
uh,
different languages.
yes, all we could do is like, you know I remember he asked my age, and I joke and I say 16. I was 21 at the time. uh, and he was like, no way. And I'm like, no, but then he has to see my ID.
Of course.
So he asked me to go out of the club, which I was, like, the girls' rule is you never leave the club. But I did leave the club. And we went to the beach, and we spent the next 3 to 4 hours yapping, talking away.
Hmm.
And that's how we were like, I guess we were like, oh yes, I like you. Yeah.
What language?
English. Yes. or like my Russian is still very primitive, but back then I didn't know anything, right? Like
And how is his Spanish?
back then was also non-existent. Today it's really good. Today, me and my mom have to speak faster if we don't want him to understand us, or use complicated language, just like wordy, so that he doesn't know. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. So, I mean, we have well, I guess the meeting story, which is really sweet. So you meet, you literally do fall in love in one night, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then you get to that stage where you guys decided, you want to you want to get more serious. You want to get married, but you're from two very different places. So, what what were you thinking? What did you think this Mexican Russian relationship would look like before you got married? Like what
Yeah.
was your yeah.
I'm not sure I was thinking. If I did, maybe I would have, like, I don't know, make a different decision or continue. But I don't think it was very conscious. I think we both were we're very cultural curious.
Yeah.
We both enjoy discovering a new side of the world. We both enjoy traveling. We both wanted to, at some point, relocate from our own two countries. So
Yeah.
I think that really attracted us.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he was showing me a whole side of the world and he was getting the same in return. I think that's why I didn't really consider but we are so different, two
Yeah.
different countries. I think I understood that there was a cultural gap
Yeah.
between us, but never really thought through like, oh, how is this going to play in the dynamic of the couple until years later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. As you said, it was more the excitement of meeting each other and getting to know different aspects of not just each other, but each other's countries and
Yeah.
parts of the world. Oh gosh, so now the two of you though, you both live in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like how does that affect you both? And in terms of, I mean, at least you have that in common. You've both grew up somewhere else and you've adapted to a whole new culture. But is it like easier for one of you or another of you?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question because I think we do live it differently at some extent. But at the same time, like you're saying, it's one thing that we have in common, right? So because we both wanted to at some point relocate, it was like a choice, right? We were not forced to leave our home countries. Um, but it definitely, like, we didn't feel it maybe until the second or third year here, because the first year is all again new and exciting and you're trying to form a new life and you finally made it to where you wanted to be.
Mhm.
But then you start feeling what is not to have roots. You really start feeling what is like, oh, like everything here is so different. And when you go to vacation or travel and to another place, even if it's a bit long term,
Yeah.
until you have to use the systems of the country, right? Like taxes, healthcare, safety, like things that as a traveler you don't really concern yourself with. The job market, that's when you start feeling like, oh, I'm not in my place. No, like I know how healthcare work in Mexico. I don't know nothing here. I know, and so that started sinking in for us. Like also, like I have a small family, but he has a big family with a lot of friends, a huge family of friends in
Yeah.
Russia, and you also come here completely alone, right? Like no one. And so again, that started like sinking in as like, oh, we're missing. I think it was good on one end that we always had each other, so at
Yeah.
least we were not alone, no.
Yeah.
So like it's like we're alone together.
Yes.
Because obviously, like, I cannot represent all of his friends, right? Like he's bound to miss his surroundings, and me too, like the food, it's so it's such a thing.
Now.
But yeah, so I think for him it starts to weight a bit more, like it would became more heavier. And for me, I'm always like, well, okay, like let's try to find other things. So in that way, I think that being in Canada uh, became a common ground. Also, we always talk about it in retrospective. We think that, well, we were alone, and so in some hardships of the transition of being a long distance couple, because we were long distance for 3 years before we got married.
Right.
Then we moved to Canada, and so that transition had also rough patches. That because we were alone and we didn't have family or friends to run to, we were
That's
forced to solve it together. No, like
oh,
because well, and maybe in your home city you run to your family or to your friends, right? Like you have the friend telling you what he thinks, or I have my mom or my family telling me what they think, and that affects the dynamic. But
yeah,
here we were alone, so it was like we only had our own problems. We were not carrying anything from the outside.
exactly. Actually, and you touched on two very important things there. One, definitely, around the idea of having to work things out for yourselves and not bringing anybody else in. And then the other thing too that I found was interesting that you brought up. You talked about having to be there for each other and kind of try to fill in the gaps. But I'm also happy that you said, you can't be everything for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
yeah, I mean, we're not meant to be, you
no,
know.
no, no. Big
So
misconception of Disney.
I-
Yes, yes, yes. He just found his princess and that's it.
That's it. That's all you need. That's all you
Yeah,
need.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, no. You need more than that. You do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You need your networks. You need your extended family. You need your friends. You need, and when I say need, I don't mean need as in, um, you can't survive without them. I
Yeah.
mean, you.
No, I understand. I understand what you mean. Like even the language, right? Like sometimes
Oh,
it
yes.
gets tiring and you're like, oh, I just want to speak in Spanish, or he just wants to speak in Russian.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was a big. I think it has been a big factor into our dynamic and how we are today because we're still in Canada, but some of those components are still missing.
That's it. That's it.
Mhm.
That's it. And yes, that language fatigue. That's a huge thing. Because as you said, yeah.
Yeah,
Go.
and when the with the language, it comes also the fact that like I sound one way when I'm speaking in English, and he sounds one way when he speaks in English, right? Like so, when I speak in Spanish, it's like maybe I don't know, I want to say like deeper or just
Mhm.
a more true me. But the same
Mhm.
way when he speaks in Russian. Um,
Mhm.
so it's always like you're missing also a bit of a I don't like a layer or one angle, of
Yeah.
that person because
Yeah.
you're like speaking in translation type of thing.
Yeah. Yep. 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 I know another couple that I've spoken to before. And for them it's similar because she is from. I don't want. It's either Ukraine or Slovenia. I'm not sure. I can't remember which one. And he is from Ecuador.
Okay.
And then they were living together in South Korea.
Ooh.
They
Okay.
met in the US and they live in South Korea. And it's the same issue with English has to be their common language.
Mhm.
And there is that element. They're like, both of us have our own interpretation of English. And
Mhm.
then now we have to understand each other's interpretation of English.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, it just gets trickier, and that's why also you have to develop more patience to and more like understanding to because a lot of the time we're going to misunderstand each other's intentions.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we're going to come back to that piece in a little bit.
Hmm.
And then before that, the other thing you had pointed out is that because it was the two of you alone, you had to figure out certain issues. And I mean, I'm from the Caribbean, and I think it's very similar for a lot of Latino families, where it's like you have this huge extended family, and they're always around,
Yeah.
and they always know your business. And if they don't know your business, they want to know your business.
See,
So,
yeah.
and it can sometimes be very hard to say, well, no, you know, this is my marriage. this is not something that you can be a part of. Yes, we want your support, but as you said, when you had issues come up, you had to figure out how the two of you would deal with it on your own without bringing anybody else in. Do you feel like that was a good thing, or do you feel like you would have preferred being able to bounce some ideas off of your mother? Or
No, I think it was ultimately a good thing. I think it was a healthier thing. Obviously, like we still have phones, so I was still able to to talk to my mom or a friend if I needed. And obviously he's the same. And by the way, I think Mexico, like Latin people, how you say, we have that thing about the family, but Russians are not that different. They were also like, I was also kind of like that, because there were like also like influence and thoughts and opinions. So it's not just the Latin.
no.
So, but yeah, I think ultimately it was a good, healthy thing. Because it made us, like, I think we didn't have to deal with, like, I don't know, someone else's problems or ideas somehow leaking into our problem when it's not really what we think or what we feel, no? Yeah. So I would say it's a good thing.
All right. So then, okay. Before I move on, let's go back to the food thing, because the food is a big thing. The food is
yes.
All right. So, what do you eat? Canadian food, Russian food, Mexican food?
I would say we eat Susy's food, which is somewhere in between. Definitely not Canadian, with all the respect to the Canadian cuisine. Just because it's just not my palate, and also Russian food is also not my palate.
It's different. It's very different.
It's different, and like Mexican is full of flavor, and for some people a bit too much, no?
Yeah.
But I love it, and so I tend to cook, even if it's not like traditional Mexican. I cook with that, with that background, with that flair, if you want.
Yes.
And I'm lucky because he eats very spicy food. He has no problem with it. He loves the flavors. He understands my suffering when we have to eat boiled potatoes or or other things that I don't particularly enjoy. But yeah, so a mix of things. Sometimes we do cook some Russian things, like there's a Russian salad that I love, or I have found the things that I like. But I would say, because I'm the one cooking most of the time, it's primarily like my flavors.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I remember when my husband and I, when we lived in England, I mean, we would try different dishes, but when we had to cook, it was like, no. Food from home. If we can find the ingredients, we're making it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when we go out, we enjoy like Asian, I would say. Yeah, Asian food. Some waffles here and there, poutine from time to time. But yeah, no, at home, and yeah, it's my flavors, and like he's a really good tortilla maker now. Yeah, he also is very demanding with the spiciness of salsa, so it's a good like, we've talked about it, and if he wouldn't like Mexican food, I don't think this would have worked.
I was not going to ask something around that.
I think if he would be like, I don't know, I don't like spicy, I think it would be a red flag for me. How are we gonna live? Like, no.
And I guess, I mean, that is one of the things, both of you being so open to exploring different cultures. I mean, yes, I mean, food is a huge part of it, but it's, you were open to exploring each other's homes, each other's language, each other's food, each other's just way of being. Because, I mean, we all know where we come from really does influence. It influences us in ways that we don't even understand. Our worldview is very different depending on where we come from. I mean, sure, we can learn about others and we can adapt, but if you're with somebody who is from a totally different culture, there has to be some sort of openness to understanding the world through their eyes, because they don't think the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, as you said, before you got married, you didn't really think about any issues that might come up. All right. So, after you got married, what do you think were like some of the like, oh,
Yeah.
this is something I didn't think about?
Yes. Like in terms of because of the culture, right? Like not
Yeah.
regular
I'm
marriages.
not really-
Okay. Yeah. Because of the culture, definitely language. Like I guess I didn't know. Like we didn't think how big of a thing it could be.
Oh,
Because also like different. There's very different intonations, and I understood this only until I started learning Russian myself, because in Mexico, and I would say that maybe Latin cultures too, we tend to be very like worthy in a way of for being polite. No, like you say, could you please do me the favor of passing me the salt? No,
see,
you
because
rarely say pass the salt.
yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah. La palabra say, say. No, it's
right.
no, say.
So it would be like if someone in a table in Mexico would say like pass the salt, you would be like, what's up with you? Like relax. Why are you being aggressive, rude, impolite? But that's how their language is structured. So sometimes he would
Mhm.
say phrases, obviously from Russian to English, there's this translation, or use tones that are like, they say that Latin people are loud. I mean, you should hear Russians talking. They're loud, no? And it sounds like they're fighting over like the no, it's a crisis. And no, they're just talking.
Just
No, they're
okay.
just talking. They're just asking you to bring something, and that was a problem that I didn't foresee. But then it was like, oh, why are you talking to me that way? Why are you being so rude? And he's like, why are you so sensitive? No, I didn't say anything wrong. It's just my tone. No, no, it's a rude tone. No, it's just a tone. So that obviously was messing with our communication too,
Yeah.
no? But yeah, then, and I think even maybe sometimes until this day, it's like, "Oh, why are you using that tone?" But I'm more mindful now that okay, it's not always it's a rude tone, no? It's sometimes it's
No.
just how it is, how it's
Yeah.
just structure. Because, like I say in Russian, there's like pass me bread. It's not wrong. It's just why do we need all the other words? You know,
Okay. The message is I need bread.
anyway, so pass it, no? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I would say that one. The other thing maybe is also Russian is a very rich cultural country, right?
Yeah.
And it's obviously big in how the collective of that people is, and some of the how they act, how they think, how they process. Like I remember his aunt always saying, "Oh, you want an easy life? You just want an easy life, no?" But I'm Mexican, so I'm like, why would it need to be hard? Why does life is like? But I understand that again, like if you look at the history of the country and the culture, it has been through a lot of hardships, no? That
Mhm.
I'm fortunate as a Mexican to have never lived a country that
Yeah.
had to be rebuilt after a war, or like so many historical events that have shaped
Yeah.
the collective, that obviously affect you as an
No,
individual.
yeah. And the
Uh,
temperature, the climate. It's
the climate, I don't know the climate thing, like, because for example, there are very hot areas there.
okay, okay.
So I don't know how much. I think it's some sort of hardship and historical events that they have had to overcome. That as a Mexican collective, we haven't had. We have other hardships, no, but that one no. So this
Yeah, yeah.
perception that life somewhat is hard, and you need to struggle to make it, and if you don't struggle, you why you want it easy, no?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Coconuts fall from the from the palms, and there's fruit here, and there's food here, and wherever you turn, you can eat something. And the ground, for example, right? Like the food, like well, you have a cold climate, so it's harder to grow stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
food has been an issue collectively, um, which is not in Mexico in that way. So it's like that mindset of like why everybody is so afraid that to say that life can be easy. It can be, it's fine.
It
uh,
can.
so
Yeah.
that sometimes also kind of like permeate a little in how our worldview, like for sometimes he's like, oh, dramatic or hard, and for me I'm like, no, no, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, it's neither right nor wrong. This is just how you are. And I like how you talked about that, the difference in the tones and how you speak. And a lot of the time we talk about communication in relationships, it's like that idea of no, 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 you have to understand how the other person is perceiving it. But I think there is some scope there for that cultural difference, and to accept that it's really hard for the other person to understand. Like, it was really hard for him to understand why you were offended, why you were
Mhm.
being so quote unquote sensitive.
Yeah.
It was very hard for you to understand, but can't he at least add a please?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, why so rude? Or why are you being so intense? No, like, why are you being so intense? And it's like, I'm not intense. I'm just talking.
Exactly. And there's just this, you don't even begin to think that, oh, there's something I'm missing. It's like, no, there's
Mhm.
nothing I'm missing. You're rude. You're
Yeah.
attentive. It's
And
just
the right way is to say be polite, like how I grew up. No? Uh,
Oh yes, that's true as well. Like, be polite. What does that mean to you compared to what does it mean to him? And then
mhm.
that idea of, speaking to each other kindly. It's like, and for him it's like, well, I'm not being unkind.
Yeah. 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 So I have taken like some commitment, no? Like not commitment, compromise.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't get so sensitive most of the time. He watches his tone. So it's like, okay, we can be, and then from time to time it's fine. No?
Exactly. And then this is why as well it's also important for, other elements of the relationship to be functioning well. And this is what, one of the things that we talk about a lot too. It's that it's not just what we say, and how we say it, it's how we act towards each other. Because if you're generally treating each other well, then you can withstand those, let's say, those lost in translation
Right.
conversation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, um, so the two things that you talked about as being challenges in terms of, in the cross culture relationship, it's how you speak to each other, one, and then two, your worldview, especially around that idea of, you know, um, life is supposed to be easy, life is supposed to be hard. What can you really expect out of this life? Um,
Mhm.
Now, something like that can be, we talk about couples having shared plans and shared goals for their future. So, like, would you say, how would you say, like, you were able to kind of understand each other or overcome that different worldview, or life is hard, life is easy?
Yeah. Well, because I think ultimately he doesn't like that too. Like he may have
Mm.
it, and maybe it's some sort of default or some sort of like. But I think we ultimately, so we're trying to form our own worldview versus my worldview, his worldview, and then like somehow we have to coexist. Instead, trying to think, okay, well, we are together, so how do we see life together, no? And like maybe we see it that there's some part that is not like, you know butterflies and rainbows, um, but then we also don't see gloom and doom, no, in
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
And instead we kind of like, I would say it makes the realistic part and practical part with like maybe positive dreamy part, and it has helped us
Mhm.
actually, I think, build the life that we have built maybe because of that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So those are some of the most serious things.
Yeah.
All right. Any funny stories?
Ooh. Um, yeah, many.
Ah!
Well, I mean, yeah. So I can tell you like one that is very. So when we were still not married, but we were already together,
Mm.
I went to Mexico City to meet my grandma, and then in Mexico City, my mom's husband, best friend, who wanted to meet us, who invite us for dinner at like this like Mexico City fancy restaurant, you could say, no?
Right.
So we go there. I dress him and he like explain the etiquette and things like that. So we go, and the friend was there with some other of his partners for business or whatever, from Monterrey, so also Mexicans.
See?
And they also have like the Mexican vibe and stuff. So they arrive, and okay, first thing everybody wants to do in Mexico for some reason is get drunk the foreigner, no, like, but they're messing with a Russian, they don't know. And then it's like they bring a bottle of tequila, and but they're kind of like serious, like gouging him,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they pour the tequila, and then the next thing he does is he get up and say, it's a bad word. And he gets up and cheers with a very bad Spanish word. To
Oh,
which in a restaurant, you know,
oh my.
families around were like, but the reaction of the people at the table, like our table, were like, yes. Like he just like win over everybody by just like being the, and they were like, okay, I guess it works, yeah, because it's when you don't maybe understand the severity of bad words in another language, and you just think that yes, I'm gonna say it, but
Yes.
it worked for him, and
No.
everybody was just so like, yeah, the Russian gets it. Yeah, but obviously the people around just were like,
Mhm, mhm, mhm. This is what I always tell people when they're like, "Oh, can you teach me some bad words in Spanish?" I'm like, "No." Because it doesn't have the same impact. You don't realize it's a bad word because it's not.
I mean, it was my fault because I do love to say bad words and love to teach him bad words. In fact, probably I would say 50% of my Russian vocabulary is also built on things that, we always say, is it grammar friendly or not grammar friendly, right? Like, so I know if I should not say it ever around grammar or, so it's like, is it grammar friendly? Yes, this is grammar friendly.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Any advice that you might have now for other couples who are it doesn't have to be Mexican, Russian, it could be
Yeah, just
anything. You could
just a
say.
mix. Yes, I would say interest in each other's culture, I think, goes a long way. And even if it takes time to, because it's also like you come with one preset from fabric, no, from where you
Mhm.
grow up, and so it takes time sometimes to deconstruct certain things and open your mind that, oh, it can be different, right? Like, and it's not that mine, it's not dismisses mine, it just expands, no, the world because it's an other view. But I'd say, yeah, being curious and interested in each other's culture also makes the other person understood and cared, no, like not just like, oh, I don't know, blend into me or into,
Yeah.
in your case, not blend into Canada. um,
No. Yeah.
so that I would say it's really good. Learning each other's language if it's possible. I know it's a big commitment, it's a challenge, but it helps connect not only with your partner but with his family, with his friends, with his city, with his like literature. There's a lot of literature in Russian, right? Like things that again help you empathize, understand, expand your world. No.
Yeah.
And I would say also, yeah, patience, because obviously it's two different things,
Yeah.
uh, and focus on building, more than fixating on like, oh, his way or my way. Focus on building like your as a couple way.
Yeah. That's it. Exactly. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
a very big one, especially when you come from two very different places. Like, what does it look like for you? You get to decide.
Hmm.
As you said, neither of you is. You're not. Yes, you come from certain backgrounds and you have ideas, but especially as you live in a whole new place, you get to really create this path forward as it suits the two of you.
Yeah, I guess another thing is that if you're thinking about relocating because you have to, I
Right.
would, now in retrospective, I would not maybe rush to leave Mexico or Russia. You
Yeah.
know, in retrospective, maybe it would have been also nice to stay and being able to have more community,
Right.
maybe not go through certain struggles that we went when we immigrated. Just to say that there's value in that. Sometimes maybe we don't see it until years passed.
Yeah, yeah,
It's something worth considering because you are leaving a big piece.
yeah. Exactly. And I mean, even if I guess it was like spending more time together in each other's country.
Mm-hmm.
Peace.
Yes. We were lucky that he lived in Mexico, in Cancun, with me for a year. And
Mm,
then I have been able to visit Russia and St. Petersburg, where he's from,
yeah,
multiple times for extended periods of time. So I've also got a little bit of that inner world
yeah.
view that it goes beyond the vacation. No?
See.
And
Mhm.
that has helped also obviously a lot.
Okay. And now, we're gonna talk a little bit about what you do as well. Uh, Now, one of the things I always found very fascinating about your relationship, and Susie will tell you about her business, but one of the things that she does, she is a Pinterest manager. And now, for many of you, you might think, oh, Pinterest is just a bunch of pretty boards, and you get to, take, record, what is it, bookmark things that
Yeah.
recipes you want to
Hey,
try. Yeah, but it's a lot more than that, and and the kind of work Susie does, Susie really gets like deep into what makes pins work, and down to like the data behind it,
the code.
the code, yuck. But which is a whole new language. But this is one of the things I find fascinating about your relationship, because your husband is a data scientist.
Yes.
Yeah, so he speaks that weird code language. And
Yes. Yes.
so like I know he doesn't actually work with you, but you make use of those skills.
I do, and I hire him monthly as a consultant for my clients' analytics to help me, just dig deeper and see what we can
Mm,
find that can be useful for their strategy, or just review the numbers.
yeah.
But yeah, he has been a big contributor to my business, not only with his data skills, but he has been pretty supportive. And um, because I stopped working in a corporation with the structure, but he is, and he
Yeah.
had all this framework of agile management and goal setting and things like that. He was spilling and bringing. He was like kind of like my coach or my manager, at some
Mhm.
point. And we were doing stand-ups and reviews and projections and plans, and so that was really actually helpful for me to keep moving the ball forward.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, kind of like bringing us back to that recognition that relationships don't exist in a bubble, right? I mean,
Mhm.
one of the things we've been talking about, the main thing we've been talking about today is that cross-cultural aspect of your relationship. But then there's the work aspect of your relationship. Then there's just plain old, the two of you,
Mhm.
and the fact that, you are together, that you chose each other, that you're living this life together. I mean, what would you say then is like one of your favorite things about being married to this particular person?
Yeah, I think we help each other grow. As much as there have been challenges, we ultimately help each other grow a lot in areas where maybe it would have been hard for me, because it's kind of like the opposite, no? Like what I'm lacking, he has, and what he's lacking, I have.
Yeah.
And we have been able to harness that in a way that manifests in something like growth for me and growth for him. Um,
Yeah.
so I love that. And I would say that another of our strengths
Mm.
across the years and all the difficulties we have to deal with, his mom passing and the immigration and being lonely. So there has been a lot of hard times, but
Mm.
we're really good at talking. So we are always able to talk. And I mean,
Mm.
since the first night when we met, we
Yeah.
talked for hours, like
Yeah.
literally for 4 hours or more. And that has been a constant throughout. So I think that has helped us to
Yeah.
to you know to keep going and say, like, okay, yeah, we can figure this out.
Exactly. And I want to kind of like highlight that again, because you're always talking to each other, despite the language differences, despite the cultural tones and all. Yes, those are issues, but deep down, you love and respect each other and you want to support each other, and that's where that ability to talk comes from.
Mhm.
And it's so important. This is why, communication isn't just about the things that we say, but it's also how we say it. It's wanting to have that connection,
Mhm.
and I think that
Listening,
listening.
I think acknowledging, because sometimes like when we struggle the most is when we don't feel that the other one acknowledge each other's side.
Mm.
So sometimes it's like, okay, it takes forever for everyone to say like, okay, I see what you're saying, and the other, and then we can move on. It's like, oh, I just needed you to say that I exist, no?
Ah, exactly.
Type of thing. So yeah.
Acknowledgement and appreciation,
Mm.
very important ones. All
Yeah.
right. So one of the other things that I wanted us to touch on a little bit before we finish up is well, tell us about what you do. I mean, I know I mentioned you are a Pinterest manager, but it's more than that. So I don't know if you want to talk to us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I help content creators and specialty brands basically drive traffic to their websites. So anyone who has a website that needs visitors, which usually
Yeah.
all websites need visitors, like a
Yeah.
blog or a shop, an online shop, or even if you are a service provider and you need people landing in your offers or your sales page. So I help you get that traffic using Pinterest. And like you said, it's beyond saving beautiful pictures. You need to think about Pinterest like you think of Google.
Yeah.
People go there because they have, or even YouTube, they have a question, they have a problem they want, or they have an idea and they type it in. And instead of getting a video or a text result, they get an image,
Yeah.
right? And that's where I help you position your content in those results, so that when people come and say like, flower arrangement for my birthday party, and maybe you have an article that talks about that. That's how they find you. Or for example, right, like multicultural marriage advice. I bet you that if we type that in Pinterest, something is going to come up, some articles talking about the challenges and how to address it, a podcast episode, a link to a YouTube video for an interview of two people talking about it.
Mhm.
So basically that's what I help people with: getting eyes on their content and obviously increasing their revenue for their business.
Exactly, exactly. And as we said, you dig deep. You don't, it's not just about, I mean, you follow the analytics, but you go even deeper than that. You look
Well,
at
yeah, I liked a lot to understand how the algorithm works, because
exactly. And how it
like
changes like every day.
I chose to specialize on Pinterest because I don't enjoy the rest of the social media dynamics. So Pinterest algorithm, if you understand the core and some of the basics and you stick to that, no matter what trend or change they're introducing tomorrow, you can stick to a solid strategy that's going to bring you long-term results. Sure, eventually you'll have to adjust to some degree, but understanding the basics,
Mhm.
why the algorithm works that way, helps me get results to my clients. So trends and flashy things don't really matter that much.
Exactly. Perfect. Actually, as we were talking here, one thing kind of occurred to me. I think you said you would describe yourself as an introvert.
No, I don't think so. I think
No.
I do. Well, I guess I don't know the definition completely. I do get some tiredness from social interaction and need
Yeah.
to recharge, but I don't necessarily struggle to have that social interaction.
No. Right. 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 And what about him?
He's the same. He gets tired, but when it's in social mood, he's good.
He can do it there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
actually it's I would say better than me because he can talk about he's curious about everything.
Ah,
So he can make conversation with the randomest person just because, he's asked questions.
this is it. Actually, I met somebody a couple weeks ago. We were traveling, and one of the things my husband had noticed about him, he's like, exactly that. This guy was just able to. we had this long conversation with this perfect stranger just because he knew the right questions to ask. He just,
Oh, nice.
and it's like, wow, that's a real skill to be
Yeah,
able to develop. I admire people who can do that.
yeah. I think comes well in his case from genuine curiosity. It's like
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. And okay, before we wrap up, your podcast. Can you tell us a bit about your podcast?
yes. So that's a passion project. It's called Bloom Whispers, and it's a podcast where we explore basically all the meanings and connections of flowers to humans. I don't know if you notice, but around you there's always a flower in some shape or form, either in art, what you're wearing, how you smell, and the medicine you're taking in your food, and just
Mhm.
literally a flower next to you. It's like they're just everywhere,
Yeah.
and apparently they have been everywhere since like the primitive man. They still were using them in burial sites and things like that. So I got very curious about understanding what was that connection, and what attract different humans to work or do like either work with the flowers or just do flower inspired work. And so we have these conversations every episode about like what does it mean for them, and some of the uses of the flowers, and just not just like the intricacies of flowers. Often starts with a sunflower and ends up in a philosophical existential question of like, oh my god, why are we here? But if you are into gardening, nature, spirituality,
Mhm.
I would say self growth, herbalism, this type of topics interest you, I invite you to listen to me on Bloom Whispers. Like you can also find the podcast on Spotify, all the distributing platforms, iTunes. And we have a website and a blog where we expand
Oh,
some of the topics. Uh,
yeah.
and most of our guests have been very generous to give us like very nice like gifts for the audience. So like if you want to check it out, it's also bloomwhispers.com.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. All right. So then I suppose. Oh, so then tell me something before we wrap up. Your um your wedding flower. Did you have a wedding flower?
So it's funny. I did have it, but I didn't have the curiosity at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was baby breath.
Oh.
It was, this tiny little,
Mhm.
that was where it was everything everywhere, like in all the centerpieces, in my hair, like in the arches, in the welcome, in the drinks, everywhere. There was in the cake. It was baby breath. Yeah.
And you got married in Mexico.
We got married in Cancun, yes. Yeah, and we got married as in like a funny story because we had the immigration thing and it was easier to prove marriage than common law. so
Oh,
we were like, we're in it, no? I think so. Let's get married. Okay, yeah, let's get married. And then we just, it's a excuse for a party. So we just had to throw the party.
exactly.
Yeah, we still need to get married in Russia.
Why not?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure they know how to throw a party for a
Oh,
wedding. Yeah.
they do. Yeah, it would have been really, really fun with his friends. The food's not gonna be as good, but we'll forgive that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What is it? You'll have your vodka. You'll have your vodka instead of your tequila.
We did. Funny enough, like his favorite drink is tequila, not vodka.
See, that's why he had to marry a Mexican.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing. I didn't necessarily marry the whatever that means traditional uh,
Yeah.
Russian man.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
stereotypical.
Yeah. He has friends who still don't understand his choice because he's like, but how are you gonna have Russian babies? If you're not married to a Russian woman. And he's like, okay. But it's a real question. It's like, but how are you gonna have Russian babies?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
We just have children.
Yeah, we just have children. But that's funny because some people really like to stick to their own,
They do. They do. They
which
just
is
what they
fine.
know is what they understand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know. Um Actually, if you do have children, what language how would you treat the language issue?
I think because I understand the advantage of speaking multiple language, I would say like for kids, you have to learn the three of them.
The three of them. Why
Yeah,
not? Why
yeah, yeah. Because it's also easier to learn when you're a kid, and when you grow up, then you
not?
speak three language fluently.
And I can say too, as a I remember when I had my children, people were like, "Well, why don't you speak to them in Spanish and teach them Spanish because you can speak Spanish?" And I tried, but then there was this thing though because English is my first language. So,
Mm,
it just didn't feel, and I read an article some years later and they said it's called your mother tongue for a reason.
right.
It's that idea that that is the language that you are connected to through your heart. So
Hmm.
you're speaking to your baby, you're going to want to use the language that the words sit on your soul,
Makes
live
sense. I
inside
like
of
that. Yeah,
you. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
English it is.
English it is. And now I'm struggling because I'm like, no, now you need to learn the Spanish. So we're going through that now.
Oh, this still like I love learning language. I think it gives you another like access to like if you would put a different sunglasses, and you see the world through different people's eyes. And I honestly think that more people in the world should learn a second language, a third language, a fourth language, or whatever, because it would help us be more empathic. Once you understand the language, you also understand the way of thinking of a whole group of people, no? And
Exactly.
that can help you on like empathize, and I think it's not too much empathy in the world today. So
And language helps with that.
this language help with that. Yeah.
I believe that. Oh my goodness. Susie, thank you so much. Now tell me something. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close up? I mean, any last words about about being in a cross-cultural relationship that you want to leave
Well,
us
that if you are in one or thinking about one, I think it's a whole experience, beyond the relationship aspect. It's definitely a ride. I appreciate it so much because it opened a whole new world that I wouldn't have otherwise. Um,
with?
and I'm very grateful for that experience, just of being an insider in a completely different culture. It's not always that you get that when you travel, right? Like, so you get to see it from like a really like local inside point of view, and I have been really privileged. So I think that with all the challenges and all the things that it comes, it also comes with a huge reward, and it just expands your world. So I definitely
Mhm.
say to anyone who's in it and trying or thinking about it, it's really worth it.
Gracias. Thank you so much for sharing.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right. So this show, it can also be heard on the Spanish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it.